is what I tell everyone, just for one day, for 24 hours, to see if you can do it. Just try to prove yourself wrong and just take that entire day and say, you know what? Other people's opinions are not going to infiltrate. I'm not going to be worried about what they think. I am going to stand in my worth and know that I am enough, and the right people will find me. And you know what? If that doesn't happen, that's okay. But I'm going to do it for me for 24 hours. So I would say start there. But then also knowing that, like, yeah, you're going to have to fail. You're going to have to try again. You're going to have to be vulnerable, like you were saying, Amy. And it's so easy, but it's so difficult. It's difficult to grasp the concept because you are so worried about what other people think. But then when you recognize how easy it is after you practice and try it, like, oh, okay, I can do this. It's fine.
Welcome to EnVibe Live Conversations with Amy Parker and Cheryl Dunn. By tuning in, you are joining a community that will inspire you to increase balance, wellness, and joy in your life. We'll offer expert information and insightful conversations to help us on our journey to live more EnVibe. For more information and articles, remember to also check out our website at envibelife.com. That's EnVibelife.com. We're grateful that you're here.
Hello, and welcome to the EnVibe Live Conversations podcast with your hosts, Amy Parker and Cheryl Dunn. Today, Cheryl and I are joined by Amanda Nelson. Amanda is a travel expert who has recently started a business called Exploring Amanda. You can find her on Instagram. You can find her at the website. I think it's exploringamanda.com, but she'll tell us in just a minute. And we can't wait to talk to her because she has the most amazing story. Amanda, we can't wait to hear about you.
Well, I can't wait to tell about me. So thank you for having me.
So tell us, how did you get into this? Because, from what I can figure out on Instagram, this is new, but you really in COVID turned your life around and followed your passion. And we believe in that 100%. So tell us how that came about.
Yes, I would love to. And also to preface, this is not an overnight sort of a success story. It takes a lot of time. And so during COVID, we were all hit hard in a lot of different ways. I was right in the middle of my, let's call it a self-worth, self-value journey. And so I feel like the timing was perfect for me to just bet on myself. And I was never normally that confident and never really into taking those very big risks that I did during COVID. But a lot of it started on, sort of my self-development journey, coming from really beginnings, like humble beginnings, I guess is what I would say. A lot of people on Instagram, they see from food stamps to getting paid to travel. And I just really want to reiterate that, yeah, you can do whatever you want to do, but it's not going to happen overnight. And you shouldn't also expect that to happen overnight. And so the traveling thing sort of happened because it was something that I was never afforded, right? Like growing up, we never really had, it wasn't a thought in my family's mind to take me and my brother on a trip. It was just, the necessities. We need to put a roof over your head and we need to feed you. And it was sort of just, you go through the bullying and like, oh, you've never been to the beach. We only live like 3 hours away. And the first time that I really ever went to the ocean, I was 13, which was leagues behind all of the kids who were like, we went as babies and that's just something that has always really, really affected me because it's something that I always wanted, but I couldn't ever had. And so I think my passion behind traveling and sort of developing into what you see now and what it really is now came from a lot of the lack that I had earlier on in life. And then taking a step back and trying to figure out how can I integrate this into my life now because I'm building something for myself, but then how can I find a way to get paid for it? Oh, and then COVID hits and we're in a pandemic and everyone says you can't travel. And, that just fueled me. I was like, well, hold my beer and watch me because I'm going to do it.
I love that.
Here we are. Yeah.
Well, and another thing I want to pick up on in there is you highlighted how sometimes lack or what you don't have is a powerful contrast to point out to you what you want. And so be grateful even for those experiences that might seem like things that aren't sources of gratitude in our life because they're such strong teaching tools.
100%. And honestly, I think you can either take that one of two ways: is if you're coming from a place of lack or from a poverty mindset like I did, you can let that drive you, or you can let that bring you down. And that decision is really only up to you and nobody else. And so instead of dwelling on it and saying, here are all the things that I couldn't have, and sort of having that victim mentality mindset, it was taking it and how can I fuel this so that I can have it and more, and watch all of the possibilities open up for me. Because I believe nothing is really going to happen if you stay in that negative mindset. And so that is something that, I tell people all the time, whether it's through my TikTok videos or podcasts or just conversations with friends at like a happy hour. It's sort of just like that victim mentality mindset is not going to serve you now in the long run, ever. And so how can you take that and turn it into something that can work for you? And if you have no idea where to start, start small, or take that and work backwards. There are so many ways. So I 100% agree with that.
So I have a question, because we talk about this a lot, having this belief system and that's really not serving you. And I feel like some of our hardest thing to overcome is the lies we tell ourselves, right? So what tools did you use on this journey to get out of that lack mentality and really, be where you are now in such a strong place?
Yeah, great question. It was very rocky and very bumpy, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't have any help. So I would say a mentor. If I could do it all over again, I would love to have had a mentor to just sort of walk me through that. But we got to get a little scrappy. We got to do things on our own, which is fine. It's right up my alley. It's my style. So I listened to a lot of podcasts. And a lot of the podcasts that I listened to were how to really focus on like money manifestation, or how to manifest what you want by sort of, law of attraction and things like that. And you see The Secret and you see all those things. Like that was a starting point for me. And I am a very restless mind. And so the meditation for me at the beginning, it wasn't working. I was still caught up in my own beliefs of you can't sit still and this is doing nothing. And so until I was at a point where I could sit still with myself and really wrestle those inner demons and kind of conquer some of that trauma, podcasts 100% is what did it for me, because I could hear other people and I could hear their stories. I'm like, oh, well, she came from this and he started here, what the hell is stopping me and why can't I get to that? So really integrating that into my daily lifestyle, that bled over into some of the music, some of the phrases, the language that I speak, what books I'm reading, what TV shows I'm watching. Now, don't get me wrong, I still like the occasional trash TV show. It's entertaining. But that really started for me was with the manifestation podcast and just hearing other people's stories, because like we were saying before we hit record on this podcast, is your story is for you to tell. And if you never tell it, and if you never open up and be vulnerable, you never know who you can inspire. And yeah, it could be scary as hell and really just terrifying. But by telling my story, I hope to inspire somebody else, like somebody that I was listening to on the podcast. So for me, podcast was a huge part of it.
Well, that really inspires me, because that's also, I think a lot of us, but a challenge for me is opening up more and more and more. And the more we do this podcast and get into EnVibe Life, the more people want us to open up.
Right.
And so you are an inspiration to me. Thank you for sharing what you're sharing.
Of course.
I like that you pointed out that even though on Instagram, it might seem like an overnight success, but it was a lot of work, and then it wasn't overnight. And I think that's important for people to hear, because even Amy and I were like, wow, look how quick she's done this, so, and it was just, I think that was the message you gave us, that don't believe that it just happened overnight.
Right. And it's just take everything with a grain of salt, because at the beginning, it may seem like something that it's completely not. And I've owned several businesses in the past to know that there is some sort of fake it till you make it at the beginning. But with the COVID transition and travel for me, I was like, you know what? This is something that I've always wanted to do. Let's just put it out there, but then also integrate part of myself in that as well so that people can see, the real, you don't need a photographer to follow you around. You can do it yourself, and just kind of evoking that independence, but also authenticity. And I know that's a buzzword, but just being like who you are at your core, and the right people will like it. And then the wrong people won't like it. And that's okay. And just when you have that mentality to go out there and be like, I really couldn't care less about any other people's opinions, and I'm focusing on myself and I'm staying in my lane, I think that's where success is built, because that's exactly what I started doing about, I would say maybe 11 months ago, about a year ago now, really just focusing on, hey, this is my lane, and I'm going to stay in it. And I'm not going to let anybody else infiltrate it, because people are going to have their opinions. And that's my biggest thing I feel like my life motto now is like, just stop giving a explicit about what other people think about your life, because their opinions don't matter. And it's like, if we could all just take that, even just for 24 hours, and try, this is what I tell everyone, just for one day, for 24 hours, to see if you can do it. Just try to prove yourself wrong, and just take that entire day and say, you know what? Other people's opinions are not going to infiltrate. I'm not going to be worried about what they think. I am going to stand in my worth and know that I am enough, and the right people will find me. And you know what? If that doesn't happen, that's okay. But I'm going to do it for me for 24 hours. So I would say start there. But then also knowing that, like, yeah, you're going to have to fail. You're going to have to try again. You're going to have to be vulnerable, like you were saying, Amy. And it's so easy, but it's so difficult. It's difficult to grasp the concept because you are so worried about what other people think. But then when you recognize how easy it is after you practice and try it, like, oh, okay, I can do this. It's fine.
All right. I feel like we're dispelling myths here. So another myth I think you dispelled or touched on in your story a few minutes ago was, you talked about through the podcast, you were able to see other people who were doing it, which gave you well, okay, if they're doing it, I can too. And, there's this kind of myth out there that I'm going to say envy is bad. But if it's envy without judgment, or envy without wanting to put someone else down,
right?
When it's envy to show you what's possible, it can be inspirational. And I think it is really valuable to use people who are doing what you're doing, or maybe even in a completely different lane, but something that is crazy aspirational, but they've done it and it inspires you, is such a valuable tool for manifestation.
100%. It's like what we were talking about earlier. You can either take that and let it bring you down and just say, like, I'll never do this, or this market's too saturated. And it's like, no, look at it as, if the market's too saturated, that means somebody has done it before you. That means you can do it too, right? There are people out there with half of your talent crushing it because they were not afraid to try and fail. So it's what you're going to take with that information, how you're going to use it ultimately.
I love this.
I do too.
You're so inspirational in yourself, and just to, hear this message from somebody other than Amy and I is great. I love it.
We tell this to each other all the time.
That's good. That's good. Y'all are like sounding boards. I love it.
Yes. And we love for like people like you to come on, and you are the proof, right? The proof that this stuff works. And that it's not just hocus pocus, that you can, your mind is so powerful if you use it to your advantage, and your
100%.
focus to it. So,
and here's the one more, and this is sort of an aside myth I want to really highlight that you've dispelled. Cheryl and I have had the opportunity to meet several, what I'll call social media influencers since we started EnVibe Life.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not people who are just out there, taking pictures and then all of a sudden they have a huge following. These people work like crazy. These are businesses, and it's a lot of hard work, and they approach it very professionally, at least most of the ones we've met. And it's really, something to be crafted and cultivated. And we've really come to respect what it takes to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think the whole key on growth, at least from my aspect, is, well, I think there will be two things. One is relatability, and really being vulnerable and putting yourself out there, and not doing And then the second is not doing what everybody else is doing, right? Like you see 99% of the people out there and they're doing the same thing and they have the same poses. And while that's great, and while I still may continue to do that, especially if I'm working for a hotel and they're paying me to showcase the property, there are really only so many things you can do. So it's like, there's the hotel bed, there's the lobby, right? But then trying to be like the 1% out of the 99 where you see the same exact, quote unquote Instagram influencer pose or whatever it is. For me, it was a mix of those two things where I really saw it skyrocketed, specifically on TikTok, because that's more of a video platform and you can see me and you can hear my voice. Or on Instagram, you can read my caption and see me, but a lot of things get lost in translation. Now, when you introduce audio, it's like, oh, okay, she's like actually a real person. She's, XYZ, and we had these preconceived notions. And you know what? That is one of my favorite parts. I love proving people wrong. I know that's not coming from a place of like a 100% good, like just heart and mindset, but I love it because they look at you and they think this, and you get to prove them wrong, and you get to say, absolutely not. Let me tell you my story. And so I think that's, I don't know. I just love it. But yeah, I agree. It's a lot of hard work. It's a business if you're doing it correctly. And so when I, in the middle of the pandemic, when I realized that I can make a living doing this, I started a media company. I filed an LLC. And a lot of people don't know is that media company is sort of like a holding. And so Exploring Amanda is just an offshoot under that umbrella. And so I'm doing a lot of other different things as well. But it's a lot. It's a lot of work, right? And right now I'm kind of in the process of figuring out how to become a solopreneur to an entrepreneur and bringing on team members and things like that. And so the growth is there. But when you look at somebody's Instagram, you have no idea. So a grain of salt, people.
So I do want to go now to some of those other things you're doing. I see that you do coaching for people, right?
I do. Yes. So we do a lot of different coaching at Exploring Amanda. I teach people how to get paid to travel. That's obviously the main, what people sort of know me for. I also do how to grow on TikTok. And so I do some social media coaching over there as well. And then I also just launched a Patreon account, which is more of like a mindset coaching. So like I can send you personalized messages based on what you're going on under the understanding that I am not a licensed therapist and I am giving my best unfiltered, no BS feedback based on my life experiences and what I think. And so that has been a lot of fun so far.
Wow, that's interesting.
And we'll have a link to your website and social all in the show notes to this podcast. So anyone who wants more information on any of that, start following you in your travels, all of the above, they can easily click and find that.
Definitely. I mean, from what I'm hearing out of this podcast, I think that your coaching would be, truly inspiring and help other people to really find their passion and go for it, whether that be travel or something else.
Right. 100%. And I think there's a common thread that runs through all of the coaching. And even, I forgot to mention the tripod course. It's like $19 because I've been taking all my own photos with a tripod and an iPhone for 3 years. And so I'm like, you know what? I should probably teach people how to do this and how to not really give a shit when you're shooting in public, even if you're an introvert, and how, like, what are the tips and tricks that I've learned, right? That common thread of independence, whether it's solo traveling as a female, independence and freedom, taking your own photos, independence and freedom, no BS, motivational speaker, independence and freedom. And so that's sort of the baseline thread that runs through all of what I do. And I hope to inspire based on that.
That's awesome.
I think we ought to talk about travel a little bit too, because so we're recording in the spring of 2021.
Yep.
A lot of us are starting to move about more freely again and
getting excited about hopefully getting to travel again.
Summer travel. Give us some tips. Yeah, we want to hear about it.
In COVID. So tell us.
Yes. Oh, I have all of the tips. Let's see. If you are somebody who is, maybe this is your first time traveling in a long time, right? You've been stuck in a house and this is your first time, things are different. And so if you're of a little bit, a hesitant mindset where you're like, I don't know what to expect, blah, blah, blah. Some tips that I would recommend is calling the hotel and asking them what COVID or extra cleaning precautions and procedures have you put into place. That's something that I started doing earlier on in the pandemic, and it soothed my mind. It made me feel a little bit more comfortable. And so I would start there. Now, if you're like, okay, that's fine, I don't care about that, or I'm vaccinated, or whatever your mindset is on COVID and what your beliefs are, then I would say the tips are, number one, just have fun 100%. Let's try to do a different type of travel. Right now that we've sort of all been cooped up, let's do either more domestic. That's been on the rise, national parks. There's one right in Texas that is phenomenal that I couldn't recommend enough, Big Bend. But I'm more of, let's talk about tips on solo sort of female travel, since that's my expertise, if that's okay with you.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Okay, perfect.
Because a lot of women are intimidated by that.
Yes, 100%. I was one of them at the beginning, right? And it's sort of, again, it's like, I wasn't always like this, you guys. So it's good to talk about. I think, for one, safety, huge, obviously huge, right? We need to be safe. There are, I would say, 2 to 3 top tips that I would typically give, which is, number one, if you are traveling as a female, whether it's domestic or international, and you are by yourself and you have never been here before, you don't know what to expect. Even if you have been to this place, 500 times, excuse me, I would say, make sure you're sharing your location with somebody that you trust on your phone, just so that they know. It's just an extra, maybe it's your mom or your daughter or your sister, somebody that you trust that can know, like, hey, I was supposed to hear from her and I didn't. So that's just an extra safety precaution. I am the most, for a lack of a better word, paranoid when I'm traveling by myself. It is the best thing I can do for my mental health. And I love it so much, but you got to booby trap the room, right? Like, you got to make sure that you're okay. And so another thing that I do often is, I lie a lot when I travel by myself. If I'm, at a bar or a restaurant and people are coming up to me, which still happens during COVID, right? Especially in a lot of the smaller towns, they're like, just come right up to you and just start having a conversation. I've said things in the past, such as, I'm meeting somebody later, or I am here with my husband on a work trip and, we're meeting up later, or something, right? Don't be afraid to, embellish the truth a little bit, because your safety at risk. And so I've done that a lot of times. And I always like to say, I lie all the time, and people are like, what do you mean? And then another thing I would say is, really just trust your intuition. Your body knows when something's wrong, even if you might feel a little bit overly cautious about something. That's okay. That's preferred, right? You want to make sure that you're just safe at all times. And so for me, safety is a huge part of that. But yeah, it's the best thing that I can recommend, even if it's a one-day trip, or you're just getting out in nature, or you're gone for a week. I don't care how long you're gone for. Every single female, in my opinion, should experience that at least once in your life. Even better if you unplug. And even though I get paid to travel and I'm sharing all the things, there are a lot of trips that I take that no one ever knows about, because I don't share, because it's just for me, right? So turn the phone off, put it on airplane mode, leave it in your car, even better. Then you have zero distractions. Get really strategic about, what do you want to get out of the trip? Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's, practicing meditation or gratitude or whatever. And it's just, when you leave a new person. And it is so simple. It's a simple concept. You're just like, okay, go somewhere overnight. Oh, but it's hard. It's difficult. And you will work on yourself, and you'll find a lot of things that you may not have necessarily known about yourself. So 100%.
You might also build some confidence.
Absolutely.
I know when I've had occasion to travel by myself, that was the case for me. Like, yeah, I can handle the rental car and going through little roads and little towns I've never seen before on my own.
Yes.
I can do this. I've got this.
Yes.
I think it's
little steps.
For like Amy and I are older, we're married with children. I think when you get in this stage of your life, you don't travel alone as much as maybe you did when you were younger. I have traveled, because of my other job, I've traveled by myself frequently, but I look at my friend group, and it's like they get into this stage and they stop. But I love that you say, do it. Even if it's the overnight, the day trip, whatever, if you have the opportunity to kind of step away from your grind of, maybe ours is where it's, kids, husbands, jobs, that kind of stuff. If you have the opportunity to step away by yourself, that's powerful.
100%, 100%. Even if you have all of those things, it will build a relationship with your spouse. I can tell you that for a fact. I've been married for 10 years. It will build a relationship with your work-life balance. It'll build a relationship with whatever boundaries you want to set in your personal life, whether that be with family and friends, and just saying like, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a step back. You're not going to be able to reach me for, let's say 24 hours at the least, Yes. Do it. You guys.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, what? We don't know how to function without you. No, you'll figure it out. It's fine. Food's in the fridge.
I love it. I just think that's great stuff, Okay, so you have done some great travels recently. If you could say, one of your favorite places, where would you say?
So I would say Round Top, Texas. It is population 90, the cutest town you have ever seen. The charm, the character, the people. I think, the people are what make it ultimately. They do Antique Week like twice or three times throughout the year, and you get people coming from all over, and then it's not 90 people anymore, and it's massive for about a week. That's fun to see. But I have been to Round Top, Texas 5 times through the pandemic. Since the pandemic started, 5 times. Wow. So I would say that means I like it.
Where do you stay?
Oh my gosh, where do I not stay? So I have a couple favorite locations, and you can find all of these on my highlights on Instagram too. The Wander Inn is phenomenal. It is great for just a retreat. You're going, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's like the second darkest sky county for stars in Texas. So Junk Gypsy, they had a show on HGTV. They own it. And so they have the shop there and all of that. And then the second place that I would recommend staying in Round Top is called the Vintage Hideaway. Now they opened during the pandemic. It's about 300 square feet, little tiny cabins. There's 5 of them, I believe. And they're the only place in Round Top that has a beer and wine garden on site. So what is not to love about that, right? And the people, I met the owners. They're just salt of the earth people. Just the people is what makes it. So Round Top, Texas, you can go to little antique shops, and there's a little square, best food, best people. So that is, I think I'm biased. I've been there 5 times, right? So I'm like, I can't shut up about it.
And for people who don't know, that would be about midway between Houston and Austin. So correct. A lot of people in Texas that's accessible to. And if you're not in Texas, but traveling, it's a good stop along the way because there are a lot of cute antique finds. And
100%. And I've talked to people. Artsy. Yes. I've talked to people who flew into Houston because it has more offerings in terms of flights, and they were making their way to the Hill Country in Austin. I said, if you do not stop in Round Top, we're going to have issues. And so they just stopped because it is right. It's about an hour and a half away from each, Austin and Houston. So yeah, 100%.
Great. I have to go. My family's in Houston and I live in Austin. So I never stop at the places in between unless I'm getting gas. So I need to go do that.
You have to.
Great tip.
Yeah, it's a great tip.
Well, I think we've heard throughout this podcast that you live a life of balance and wellness right now. And I think that's infused into your business and part of what's made it successful. But here, we talk about living in vibe. And so we like to ask our podcast guests, what do you do maybe on a daily basis or a regular basis to live in vibe, maybe to bring joy or balance or fun into your life? Besides travel, to put you on the spot.
Besides travel. So this one is fairly new. I've done this a handful of times, and it is something that I will absolutely continue to do. And when I tell you, you're going to think I'm crazy. But listen, I will drive up. There's a spot probably about 10 minutes from my house towards like the Hill Country area in Austin. And I will get on the top of this hill, and I will get out of my car, and I will scream. And I scream and I let everything out, and I scream whatever I want. Sometimes it's affirmations or mantras. sometimes it's whatever frustrations I'm feeling. There's nobody around that can hear me. And if they can, they're getting a free show. Like, that's hilarious, right? But it has been so helpful. Like I said, I've done it about a handful of times, but I think it's something that I'll continue to do. And I made a TikTok video on it and it like blew up and people think it's hysterical, but I'm like, no, really? Like, it is funny, like, and it's hysterical and it's odd maybe, but try it. And it's just, you release everything. It just feels good to get it out, right? Like, it's your body's way of releasing it. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Just like a good cry, right? Your body has these things pent up that it needs to release. And so if you can cry, you can scream, and it's just like, why not? Just throw it all out there, and then you leave and you're like, oh, that was great. I just let go of all of that shit that was annoying me. So
there used to be an Austin group, and I'm dating myself, many years ago, but I remember reading about it. And it was some well-known people in town. And every time there was a full moon, they would get together and howl at the moon. And that was one of their things.
Oh, that's awesome. I did not know about that.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Keep all weird. Yeah.
there you go.
Well, Amanda, this has been such a pleasure. Your information has been great. Your story is great. Thank you so much for sharing it with our audience. It's just been great having you on here. We're going to go ahead and put all of your information in our show notes so that people can reach you and find you and follow you on TikTok or Instagram, or go to your website and follow your travels and your inspirational stories, because I think that's just as important.
And we all need to get out there and plan our personal solo journey.
I know. I love it.
Yes.
Can't wait.
Please do.
Well, thank you for coming on.
It's been a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Likewise. This was fun, you guys. I'm so excited that I was able to come on here. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to EnVibe Live Conversations. For more information and to join our community, be sure to check out our website at envibelive.com. We look forward to sharing with you.